Hello Fear Seekers, and welcome back to the channel. Today, we're going to be diving into some disturbing, allegedly true, horror stories told in the rain. So sit back, enjoy the sounds of nature weeping, and get ready to ferment your fears. Hi. Never posted before and not quite sure if this is the right place, but here we go anyways. This is one of the scariest things to happen to me as a kid, and it has always stuck with me. It was about 10 years ago and I was 9 years old. I had just moved back to California with my family. We were to be living with my grandmother in a cramped 2-bed, 2-bath, and I was excited. My grandma was an older, pretty religious Filipino woman, a converted Hindu and faithful Catholic. I'm not sure if that's a contradiction because I don't know much about either religion, but her house had lots of shrines, candles, paintings of Jesus and Hindu gods, and this overall weird energy I could palpably feel as a kid. It's important to note that I now consider myself a very open person. Someone who may unknowingly attract these sorts of occurrences. This may not be important to the story, or maybe so, I'm not entirely sure. But as a child, I would hear music and voices whispering to me, as well as smell strange things when triggered by certain words. At the time of this event, this was something I was used to and knew about myself. Because of this, I had some interest into Wicca and the occult. Not as much as I would later have, because I was still a child, but enough to often sit on the floor of my aunt's dimly lit and cramped room and look at her books on witchcraft. I don't know when and why, but around that time I began to have super strange, frequent, and all-encompassing thoughts of the devil and demons. It would always be running through my mind, and I would comfort myself by remembering to recite some of the Hail Mary my mother had taught me. My aunt's room had a really creepy, suffocating feel to it, but I'd always spend time alone up there even though I felt as if there was something watching me. I could place the energy coming from in front of her closet. My aunt is mentally ill and at the time was not on meds, so her room was filled with stuff, but especially the closet. It was always open about a couple of feet or so, with lots of her things kind of stuffed in and falling out. It was always pitch black on that side of the room, especially in the closet from what I could see. I slept up there with her and was so jumpy and afraid all the time that I couldn't even shower by myself. One night, my aunt goes out and my mother, my little brother, and I go to sleep on her bed. I remember I was so afraid and I couldn't stop staring at this creepy green fairy thing that my aunt had hung from a string near her bed. It always seemed to sway and I felt that when I looked in its eyes, it was sentient or something. I was in between my mom and brother, but sleeping the opposite way from them at their feet, staring at the space near the closet. I went to sleep and in my dream woke up. I sat straight up and felt such dread and fear I'll never forget. In the dream, I tapped my mom awake and she looked at me in surprise. She said, "Iana, you're bleeding." I then felt my nose and realized blood was dripping from it, then my eyes, my ears, and my mouth. I got super freaked out and said, "Mommy, I've been thinking about the devil a lot," and something along the lines of how I couldn't stop and was really scared. But by the time I was done talking, she'd actually laid back and gone back to sleep. Then, in a moment of absolute horror, something was on top of me. It was dark and I couldn't see, but I remember thinking it was a little white man. It was sitting on my chest with its knees on my collarbones, growling, hissing, making terrifying noises while it literally, and I mean literally, choked the absolute hell out of me. I was trying to flail my arms around, but I couldn't move. It lasted so long, I remember thinking, oh my god, when will this end? And then as suddenly as that, I awoke for real. I was laying on my back, breathing heavily and feeling sore, in the exact same spot as the dream. Briefly, I thought, oh no, is this real? Will it happen again? So I lay in silence until I could muster the courage to turn and look at the closet. I felt absolutely horrified. The space was radiating the most intense, deep hate and evil I have ever felt. I will never forget. It has stuck with me for so long. I could just feel something staring at me so intensely, and also the sense that it knew that I knew it was there, that we were looking at each other in that moment. I rubbed my mom's hip for comfort and laid back down, immediately starting on a Hail Mary. I did it again and again until I could fall back asleep. For some reason, I also felt, although I was sleeping, that whatever it was left. It was like I could sense it walking out of the room. When I woke up, I went to stand near the closet, and the space felt kind of empty. Anyways, I grew up and forgot about this story. I used to tell it to friends for a scary laugh. But I've just finished my first year of college and moved back here for the summer, so it's been on my mind. This wasn't even the most frightening thing to happen in this house, so we'll see if any other future things happen. Hopefully not. Over the course of a few days, I've come to remember a number of pretty weird happenings around my old childhood home. I've been able to confirm some with my parents, but my siblings often do not remember, and tend to believe that it may have been a prank by other such siblings, or outright deny it ever happening. It'd probably be wise to explain a little bit about this house. Early in the 90s, my parents moved from their original city to the new city, with my mother pregnant with my younger brother. When shown the home, my parents took note that nothing was out of the ordinary, but the showing was rather brief and they were also in a bit of a hurry. They soon decided to rent the house and moved in, and to their dismay, found the basement filled to the brim with markings all over the walls and ceiling/floorboards. The walls had spray-painted Nazi symbolism all over them, coupled with what my father describes as odd circles, but my mother confirms as witches' circles or demonic markings, some burned into the wood. My mother later confirmed a few Ouija boards etched into the walls as well. They complained and, instead of moving, had the basement cleaned, repainted, fixed, and continued to stay for the duration of my childhood. The first occurrences happened when I was between the ages of 5 and 9 years old, continuing for the entire 4 years. Roughly every night I would refuse to go upstairs, under any circumstance. I would physically refuse and fight my mother, or father, and would often throw a huge fit when they attempted to physically move me upstairs. When finally asked why I was so vehemently refusing to go upstairs, I outright told my parents, "The girl in the white dress at the top of the stairs says it's not safe yet." The funny thing is, I remember the little girl. I can't remember her face, but I remember she was about 7, and would tell me not to come upstairs, because it wasn't safe. She wouldn't outright speak. She would somehow convey the message while shaking her head. I remember that because it scared me the most when I was a kid. She would look in the direction of my room for a little bit every so often, and then simply look at me and disappear. That is when I knew it was safe to go upstairs. When I reached the age of 10, this stopped happening altogether. I never saw the girl again, but different and stranger things began to happen. Late one night in our backyard, someone was murdered, moments before my father came home. Fortunately that night, he decided to come through the front door instead of going through the back. Later, odd meat was thrown in our backyard and we found our dog smelling at it. My dad brought him in and the police restricted all access to our backyard for the remainder of the year. We later found out that the victim was shredded to death. We always assumed that was the meat. Of course, this likely made things worse as a lot of the blood from that meat was on our property and took a while to clear out. Within the same year, my brother and I had a small area set up for us in the basement to play. Each time we would go down there, we would hear strange whistling. This whistling was very similar to a human whistling a tune while doing busy work, but was often eerie. For an entire year, my brother and I were trying to find the source of the whistle, and when we found it, we were terrified. I remember it well. I was turning 11 soon, and we followed it behind the furnace. There, we found a shadow, similar to a human shadow cast upon the wall. It was tall, it had a hat, no features, just like a normal shadow. It confused us because we didn't understand how a shadow was there, because there was no light behind the furnace. It was dark, but the shadow was somehow darker. Then it looked at us. I use quotes because physically it couldn't look at us, but we just knew. We knew it was looking at us. Then it whistled. I'll never forget that tune. I'm not sure if anyone knows the tune, but it was the tune used for yodeling. Needless to say, we ran upstairs to our mom, terrified. She came to check it out, despite us telling her not to, and found nothing. We didn't play in the basement for a week after that, but every so often, we would hear the whistling during the week, and despite us asking our parents if they heard it, they never did. When we went back into the basement to play, at the insistence of our parents, as we were getting in the way of cleaning, etc., everything was okay for a little bit, but eventually the shadow came back. It would always get our attention with the same tune, always trying to convince us to come to touch it, to see it. Neither of us would ever approach it, and we realized it was stuck to the walls, literally. It couldn't go up the stairs and could only travel along the walls, freely, except for the stairway wall. I remember telling my mom about this when I was older, and she confirmed that the only wall not covered in symbols was the wall with the stairs and the stairs themselves. As long as we remained away from the walls, the Shadow Man couldn't get to us, and it eventually resorted to yelling, before eventually leaving forever. By the time I was 12, it never appeared again. However, the basement still continued to have weird events. During the summer of my 12th year, my cousins, brother, and I were playing as my parents and other family members cleaned up after a barbecue. As we played, the furnace began to glow bright red on the filter door, as if it was being heated by a torch. It had started from the center of the door and grew to encompass the entire door, before receding and leaving a bluish-green stain behind. Needless to say, we were all confused. My cousin, who often spent time with his contractor father, insisted that we take the filter door off and check if it had caught fire. We tried to tell him about all the weird stuff, but he didn't believe any of it, and was convinced the filter burned. Upon taking the door off and inspecting it, it was pristine. The door was still the standard silver, without any indication of burning, and the filter was its standard whitish-gray, clean and new, as it was replaced not too long before. He took the filter off and there was just a vent. Below that, a sizable amount of space and a a space to reach the pilot light hatch for the furnace. He put everything back confused. We got our parents and his dad checked everything out. Save for the door exterior, the furnace was in perfect shape. After this incident, nobody would go in the basement again for a while, except to store things. At least until I turned 16 and insisted upon no longer sharing a room with my brother. I had forgotten the past and decided to move into the basement. Things start to get a lot more terrifying when you sleep in an unfinished basement at night. Consistent nightmares and weird sightings to the point where I often slept at my friends' houses to simply avoid sleeping in that basement. But I will share the most terrifying experience that I had discovered, as my friends ceased to ever stay at my house and insisted upon staying at theirs until we moved. Due to often staying at my friends' houses, their parents began to get a little frustrated that I would never invite them over to my own home to stay the night. I often insisted against it, but eventually relented as the perfect opportunity came up, when my friend's parents were away for a week and he was to stay behind with me at my place for a week. Needless to say, he was delighted, but I was extremely worried. To explain the basement a little, in order to gain some privacy and as my family was not well off, we set up a wall using a bedsheet stapled to the beams of the basement ceiling. These sheets were effectively the walls of my room with a small opening as an entrance. Anyways, I digress. Everything was fine for the most part of the week until roughly the 4th day. Around midnight, my friend couldn't get to sleep and decided to try and get some shut-eye in the armchair in the corner of my room, which faced the bedsheet wall. As I was asleep, he awoke in a cold sweat and noticed the bedsheet ruffling a little bit. He noticed what seemed like a handprint on the other side of the sheet, pressing against it. Assuming it was my sister, who had a crush on him at the time, he jokingly asked the person on the other side to come around. He tells me that the hand moved along the sheet, with little giggles, towards the edge that was used as an entrance. As it neared the entrance, he expected to see my sister, but nothing appeared. He looked behind the sheet, and there was nothing. Nobody. He didn't sleep the rest of the night, and told me about it the next day. On the 5th day, he got over it, and determined he was dreaming, and again the night time came. He again woke up in a cold sweat that night, to find a girl in a white dress, about our age, standing beside my side of the bed, just looking at me. He told me she wasn't scary, her face wasn't messed up, but she looked sad. When she saw him, she simply looked at him, frowned, and walked towards the exit again, and he didn't dare move. He told me that I was having nightmares as she stood over me. He didn't stay the rest of the week. About a few months later, we moved, and he always wanted me to stay at his place until the moving date. When he would come over, he never went into the basement, not even to help me move my stuff. I dream about the house every so often. Weird, lucid dreams. I can never really go into the basement in these dreams, and sometimes I can't enter the house. But it always seems different. Ethereal. Anyways, I have a lot more tales from this home. These were just a few. Hope you liked my true tales. Hey guys. Glad to see you made it to the end of the video. If you liked it, consider dropping a like and subscribing to the channel for more spooky content. Alright guys, that just about wraps up the video. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. So long, Fear Seekers. I'll see you in the next video.
He's not dead.